Russian officials have accused the outgoing Biden administration of a policy of scorched earth that is leaving behind a series of disasters for incoming President Donald J. Trump. Today is Monday, January 13th, and we're going to be talking about exactly what they mean by this and other important developments. Now, in the first case, you could say we have literally scorched earth, where we have the raging wildfires in the Los Angeles area, which so far have claimed at least 24 lives. I'm afraid that we're going to discover more dead. It's really a tragedy which did not have to happen. And contrary to the hysterical narrative by some that this is the result of climate change, it is explicitly the result of not having listened to first former US Senator Robert Kennedy, who in 1968, before he was assassinated actually in California, had endorsed the policy of the North American Water and Power Alliance, something later picked up and promoted by Lyndon LaRouche, which was calling for taking a tiny percentage of water from Alaska, which normally the rain hits the mountains and then just runs off into the ocean unused, diverting a little bit of that up into the Rocky Mountain Trench and then irrigating the entire western part of the United States. This is something that must be back on the table, and the LaRouche organization will be releasing a video on the matter a little bit later today. So we have that literal scorched earth policy. But I think what the Russians were referring to is the announcement of new sanctions on Russian oil, specifically vessels that are carrying Russian oil, since the sanctions we've already imposed unilaterally, I might add, haven't done enough damage, and because the real target is not merely Russia, but is the BRICS process. So officials, British and American officials, are gloating that these new sanctions hopefully are going to not only hurt Russia, but China and India as well, trying to jam a stick into the spokes of a new emerging system against colonialism. And as we've seen from the earlier sanctions on Russia, I will go out on a limb here and predict that this is not going to work either. When billions of people are determined to end economic slavery and have economic development, you can't really stop them. Now, otherwise, in the new year and along the scorched earth lines, you have a situation where clearly Netanyahu is being allowed to expand his genocidal policies into the West Bank and perhaps being encouraged, we don't know, to launch strikes on Iran. The US and Israel jointly launched strikes on Yemen. Is that a practice? I don't know. This is extremely dangerous, and we have a new Congress just sworn in. They better get their act together to put a halt to the lack of any preconditions on the weapons we're sending to Israel or Ukraine. Also, there's a revolt, and this is what I think they're really afraid of, both in Europe and as we saw in the United States with the election of Donald Trump. In spite of all of the propaganda, indictments, and political witch hunt, the American people don't want more wars. We want something done to address the situation inside the United States, which is in desperate need of being taken care of, as you see in Los Angeles right now, and as we saw in North Carolina with floods. We seem to be acting as if we've gone back to the Stone Ages and human beings are incapable of intervening to improve nature through scientifically tested methods. But you have a situation continuing in Europe where Zoran Milanovic was overwhelmingly reelected as president of Croatia, campaigning to stop a war with Russia, to stop using Ukraine as a proxy for a war with Russia. He got 74% of the vote. You have another situation in Romania where people may or may not be aware that they, under pressure from the European Union and NATO, I'm sure, didn't do a runoff election because the guy who won in the first round was an anti-war candidate, Georgescu, who's been recently interviewed, saying that Romanians do not want to be a door for war with Russia. They don't agree with the new NATO base being built there, which is designed to hold 10,000 American or NATO troops and their families. And he has overwhelming support. And if people doubt this kind of extreme election meddling, listen to this. The former EU Commissioner Terry Breton said in an interview on January 9th that Europe should, quote, keep our cool and enforce our laws in Europe when they risk being circumvented and when they can, if not enforced, lead up to interference. We did it in Romania. We overturned the election, basically, and we will obviously have to do it if necessary in Germany, i.e., if the AfD wins the German elections or secures a majority leadership, because the Germans don't want war either, being on the front lines if there's going to be a war with Russia, that they will meddle to overturn the German elections. That's what they're threatening. A Hungarian member of parliament, Andres Leslo, in the ruling Fidesz party, actually got on X and wrote, quote, when 10 million US dollars was illegally channeled to the Hungarian left for their 2022 election campaign, elites in Brussels were silent. When the US Embassy in Budapest started distributing funding to the left-wing media, Brussels was silent. But when the Hungarian parliament adopted a sovereignty protection law to prevent millions of foreign dollars from flooding into Hungary, suddenly the European Commission wants to intervene. And I think that's the issue, and Americans certainly feel it. We would like to have our votes counted without the lying intelligence agencies and others interfering. And I don't think it's the Russians, by the way. Finally, I will just say that the LaRouche organization will be releasing shortly a dossier intended to go to all US senators, but to be used as material for organizing to bolster Trump's nominations of Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence and Kash Patel for Director of the FBI. You have to ask, why would people listen to those who lied us into the war in Iraq, which killed at least 5,000 American soldiers, perhaps an equal number of contractors, hundreds of thousands of Iraqis, led to increased terrorism and instability in that region? The people who lied to cause us to do that are the very people who are terrified about Tulsi Gabbard and Kash Patel. They're the very people who will plunge us into another war. They should not be listened to. We need people advising President Trump who are going to look for the truth, who are going to stand up for lies, who are not going to take the lives and well-being of the American people in vain as something to be squandered. So this is very important, and I would urge people to assist in the circulation of this dossier, which, as I said, will be available very shortly on the LaRouche organization website.